For decades, the story of this place was told from far away, from elsewhere. But tonight, you'll hear it straight from the fields and the factories, from the cracked palms of farmers who finally found a voice strong enough to change a nation. Imagine waking before dawn to a landscape most maps ignore. Two hands that have worked the same soil for generations, and to a question that could no longer be answered with polite speeches. Why does a country of farmers import mountains of food while its people still wake to empty plates? The answer begins not with slogans, but with ordinary conversations under trees, the kind of unvarnished truth-telling that rewrites policy when someone in power actually listens. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who assumed leadership after the September 30th, 2022 change in power, didn't start with committees or consultants. He walked into fields. He heard the same list of small tragedies repeated 1,000 times. No access to machinery, no reliable credit, poor storage that turned harvests into loss, and policies written by people who had never planted a seed. And he reacted in a way that looked deceptively simple, but carried the weight of a strategic pivot. From those rural conversations came a concentrated national offensive on agriculture. Launched in 2023, this program dedicated tens of billions of CFA francs toward equipment, inputs, and organizing production so the work of the farmer could finally translate into the stability of a nation. The plan was practical, rapid, and rooted in humility. Put machines where hands were strained. Move agricultural engineers out of distant bureaucratic offices and into the villages, and pair mechanization with training, maintenance, and community ownership. The goal was to ensure equipment would not rot in warehouses, but become tools farmers could use and sustain. That investment was real and measurable. The government allocated a widely reported 78 billion CFA francs to buy equipment and strengthen capacity. Across several campaigns, hundreds of tractors, tillers, pumps, and other implements were handed to producers and cooperatives. This allowed planting, harvesting, and post-harvest handling to be done at a scale and speed that human labor alone could not match. The results, even in a country battered by insecurity and displacement, were striking. Yields climbed in some regions by roughly 35 to 40%. And for the first time in years, the nation posted cereal surpluses across consecutive seasons. This wasn't because violence disappeared, but because policy treated agriculture and security as linked problems, not separate ones. That linkage mattered. When fields must be tended inside a landscape of threat, speed is protection. Mechanization reduced the time farmers spent exposed in vulnerable terrain. Smarter deployment of production zones, paired with regional security coordination under initiatives like the Alliance of Sahel States, helped make movement more predictable and safer for rural producers. At the same time, the state pushed for processing capacity so value didn't leak away the instant crops left a village. Community-owned processing units, regional tomato plants, rice and flour projects, and plans for mango, drying, and poultry feed meant that a harvest stopped being a one-day windfall. Instead, it became a sustained source of income, a series of linked enterprises where the farmer, the miller, the transporter, and the local entrepreneur all captured value inside the country, rather than watching profits walk across borders. These moves revived an old idea, one that had been part of Burkina Faso's politics before. The conviction that food autonomy is merely symbolic but foundational to genuine independence. That conviction has a history. When people on the land speak today, they often trace the spirit of what they are living back to Thomas Sankara. His revolutionary push in the 1980s prioritized agrarian self-reliance, mass mobilization, irrigation projects, and cooperative storage, delivering striking gains in production and moving the country toward food sufficiency. But this isn't just nostalgia. What's unfolding now is a modern, hybrid approach. It borrows the philosophy of local ownership while marrying it to drones for surveillance of risky corridors. Neighborly intelligence sharing, targeted mechanization, and national financing mechanisms that recycle domestic resources into rural investment rather than sending revenues out to foreign middlemen. This domestic financing has included redirecting state resources and fostering new public-private partnerships. The aim is to ensure at least half of the financing for key initiatives comes from local investors and nationalized revenues. It's a design meant to keep decision-making and profits inside the country and to align incentives around rural livelihoods. The transformation is not only technical, psychological. When a village collectively owns a processing plant, when a cooperative receives a tractor with trained mechanics, when a displaced family is offered paid work, clearing land, and building irrigation, farming becomes not just survival, but a career with dignity and growth. People begin to plan beyond one season, to plant varieties that can be processed, to invest in storage and seed quality, and to see agriculture as the backbone of local economies rather than a last resort. These shifts are visible in markets, in household incomes, and in the slow remaking of rural expectation from subsistence to participation. There are honest limits and real risks. Conflict continues to displace families, climate shocks still threaten crops, and critics rightly warn about environmental trade-offs and the dangers of centralized control. This is why the policy mix emphasizes decentralized processing units, small-scale technology for smallholders, and relocating expertise into the field so decisions can be revised in real time, not delayed in distant ministries. The story is also about hard choices. Nationalizing resources to fund agriculture can alienate foreign partners. Yet it can also produce a more durable revenue stream for public goods, where previous models left rural areas dependent on unreliable aid. If you've made it this far, consider this a brief, aside from me, your narrator. You are smarter and more focused than most people scrolling past this very moment, because you have stayed with the argument to its practical heart. Every video on this channel is built on real information, deep research, and verified facts drawn from reporting, public data, and field accounts. The stories we tell are not myths, but documented shifts with human faces behind them. And those human faces are crucial. Farmers who once shrugged at promises are now organizing credit pools, forming cooperatives that own processing shares, and training mechanics to keep tractors running in remote regions. Where fields were abandoned, coordinated planting, and the targeted distribution of over 1,000 pieces of equipment in recent campaigns have helped recultivate land. This restores community work rhythms and creates jobs for displaced people, reducing recruitment into armed groups, a strategy that treats economic opportunity as a direct component of security. The implications ripple beyond one border. If a country in the Sahel can raise production, process more of its own goods, and fold displaced populations back into productive work, it creates a template that other fragile states can adapt. Localized processing, community financing, appropriate mechanization, and the political will to center rural voices. This isn't to claim a simple victory or to dismiss the human costs of conflict, but to insist on realism. When people who live a reality are finally the authors of its fixes, the fixes become durable. In the end, this is a story about reclaiming agency through things that look ordinary but add up to sovereignty. Tractors that hum at dawn, grain stored in village. Silos, a tomato plant owned by local shareholders' children who see agriculture as a path of growth instead of an inherited cycle of scarcity. It's about the hard work of listening, the discipline of translating words into equipment, and the stubborn, everyday courage of communities that choose to farm despite the danger. We'll be starting an upcoming Q&A session where I'll answer your questions about sources, methods, and the frontline reports you want us to dig into next. So post your questions in the comments, and I'll pick the most pressing ones for the live session. If you believe stories like this deserve to be known, like the video. Share it with someone who cares about real change. Subscribe to the channel for more deep research into Black history, culture, and contemporary movements. And press the bell so you don't miss the Q&A, where we'll go deeper into the data, the people, and the choices that shape what comes next.